All right. So yeah, good evening, everyone. So today we will complete the proof of the Tut-Berge theorem, right? Um, and as you will see, we actually did the most difficult part in the last lecture. In particular, we talked about hypomatchable graphs, and we showed that these are exactly those connected graphs where each vertex is inessential, right? And it turns out that this is actually the most important case of the proof we are going to do. And it's already done because in hypermatchable graphs, finding a barrier is quite easy. Okay, so let's see. Um, just to remind you, a barrier S is a subset of the vertices such that if you look at the size of the maximum matching, the matching number, it is exactly equal to the following quantity. Right? And that is the same as saying that the number of unmatched vertices will exactly be this quantity. Right? This is the number of exposed vertices with respect to a maximum matching. Okay. So, right. So let's first observe that actually proving the Tut-Berge theorem for hypermatchable graphs is quite easy. So lemma 16.8. Basically, it's a Tut-Berge theorem for hypermatchable graphs. Okay, so let's look at an example. Can anybody see a barrier in this example? You want to delete some vertices and you want to have exactly one odd component because in any maximum matching, exactly one vertex is exposed, right? So what set of vertices can you delete so that the remaining graph is just one odd component? And there could be some even components, but actually there won't be. I'll give you a hint. This is any subset of the vertices. It could also be all the vertices and it could also be
Then
none
remove
of
two
them.
vertices.
Sorry?
Then
Remove two
remove two
vertices. Right. You can remove two vertices here. But now let's suppose I give you a bigger graph, which is hypermatchable. Then that may not work, right? Your graph could disconnect. So in this example, it works. Actually, it doesn't work. Sorry. No, two vertices does not work. Sorry. You cannot delete two vertices because you need to get one more odd component than the number of vertices you deleted. So if you want to delete two vertices, you should get three odd components. Sorry, my bad. So what you want is the number of odd components should be one more than the number of vertices you deleted, right? Because a maximum matching will leave exactly one exposed vertex.
Remove empty set.
Remove the empty set and observe that this works for every hypermatchable graph. So in fact, the empty set is a barrier of every hypermatchable graph. Right? Because the hypermatchable graph will have an odd number of vertices, that is clear, right, by definition. And so if you delete nothing, you will be left with the whole graph, which is your only odd component. And so that is one more than the number of vertices you deleted, which is 0. So it's basically trivial. In fact, what is very interesting is that in hypermatchable graphs, these are the only barriers. I might put this on your assignment or one of the do-it-yourself or try-it-yourself problems. Okay, so this is easy. Right? And it turns out that this is actually going to be the base case of our proof of the Tut-Berge theorem. Okay, so let's try to prove. Right, so what do you want to show? You want to show that every single graph is a barrier. So let's say G is any graph. Okay. So if the graph is hypermatchable, then you are done. So let's actually prove by induction on the number of vertices. By induction on the number of vertices of the graph. And there is one more do it yourself, which I think I put on yesterday's do it yourself problems. If you have a graph G, and let's say it has a bunch of components, so in general it may not be connected. So for each component you take some barrier, right? So B1, B2 up to BR. They are barriers in the components G1, G2 up to GR. Okay. So let's say BI is a barrier of GI, and G has components G1, G2 up to GR. Then you can prove that if you put all the barriers together, you take their union, then this will be a barrier of the whole graph. Okay, that's a very straightforward exercise using just the definition of a barrier. Okay. So in particular, if the graph is disconnected, then each of the components will have a barrier by induction, and then you are done by this do-it-yourself exercise. The whole graph is a barrier. If G is disconnected, then by induction hypothesis, each component has a barrier, and now we are done. Okay. So now suppose that G is connected. All right. So now we are going to break this into two cases. The easy case is when, well, it's not actually the easy case, it's a difficult case, but we have already done the hard work. So if the graph has any essential vertex, then that's going to be our induction step. So let's suppose each vertex of G is inessential. So you have a connected graph, every vertex is inessential. What does that mean? If you have a connected graph in which every vertex is inessential, what can you say about the graph?
I mean hypo or
Right. It's hypomatchable. So this graph G is hypomatchable, right? This is due to lemma 16.10, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, which we proved yesterday, right? And if it is hypomatchable, then we are done because the empty set is a barrier, right? We just want to show that the graph has a barrier. So by 16.8, empty set is a barrier, and we are done. Okay, so this is basically our base case, which we've already proved yesterday, basically. All right. So now let us suppose that G has a vertex, or let me say G has an essential vertex. Okay. And let V be any such vertex. Okay. Well, by the induction hypothesis, the graph G minus V has a barrier, say B. So our claim, well, basically we'll prove a lemma. So it's exactly the setting that we have here. It's lemma 16.9. Okay, so V is an essential vertex of any graph G, and B is a barrier of G minus V. Then we claim that B union V is a barrier in the original graph. Okay, so that's exactly what we are going to prove here. So that's the statement, and maybe I'll just write down the proof on this part. Right? So this is what we want to show. We want to show that this set is a barrier in the whole graph G. All right, so let's just do the proof within the proof of the Tut-Berge theorem. So what does it mean? What does it mean to say that this set B is a barrier in G minus V? Well, it means that the maximum matching number, the matching number of G minus V is exactly the following quantity, right? It's half times the number of vertices in G minus V, because we are looking at that graph, minus the number of odd components in G minus V after deleting the set B, and I'm removing the brackets, so then I have a plus B. Right? But remember, this is an essential vertex. Let's go back to how did we define these things. We defined essential and inessential vertices yesterday, and here is how we defined them, right? An essential vertex is one. When you delete it, the matching number goes down by one, right? All right, so we know how to relate by definition the matching number of G minus V and G, right? So this is basically the original matching number minus 1. Since V is essential in G. Okay? And let's write down everything in terms of the original graph G instead of G minus V. So what do I have here? It's the number of vertices of the graph G minus 1 because I've deleted one vertex, and the number of odd components, let me write it in terms of G. Notice that deleting V and then deleting B is the same as deleting B union V together. And now let me delete the vertex V. Sorry, let me add this cardinality and subtract 1, right? Which is the same as what we were doing before. Okay. Notice that I've got a minus 1 here. I've got a minus 1 and a minus 1 here. Minus 2 multiplied by a half. So I can cancel all of that. And so that basically means that the matching number is exactly the quantity we actually want. It's the number of vertices minus the number of odd components in G with respect to deleting this set of vertices and adding the cardinality of, right? Yeah, that's correct. Okay. And this is exactly the definition of a barrier in the graph G. B union B is a barrier in G. Right? So honestly, the induction step is just a bunch of easy arithmetic that just follows from the definitions. The real part of the proof was the hypermatchable case and realizing that this is a nice way to prove it by induction. This is definitely not the original proof, I believe, but over the years, people have found easier ways of doing things. So this is a very sort of concise version among all the proofs out there. Most proofs I know they do make use of hypermatchable graphs or factor critical graphs, as they are also known as somewhere earlier. Okay, good. Are there any questions or concerns about this proof? Okay, so if not, we have finished proving the Tut-Berge theorem, which was one of the main points of this module in the non-bipartite case. And it basically implies everything we have done before, right? I mean, most results, except for the edge coloring results, follow from the Tut-Berge theorem. You can get all of the bipartite matching results from the Tut-Berge theorem. There is some amount of work required in some cases, and on top of that, you also get things we have already discussed. Um, you get Tut's theorem for perfect matchings. You get the Tut-Berge formula, right? And from Tut's theorem for perfect matchings, we have already proved Peterson's theorem, which is that every three regular graph without cut edges is matchable. It has a perfect matching. Right? So yeah. There is an algorithmic component to matchings. We did that in the bipartite case. We had some discussions, but in the non-bipartite case, it's much more complicated. So, in fact, it took several years. So you can see that Berge is from 1947 to 58, right? But it was only in 1965 that Jack Edmonds gave a polynomial time algorithm for finding a maximum matching in any graph. And that requires new ideas. When the algorithm terminates, it will actually give you certificates like the maximum matching and the barrier and all those things. But the algorithmic component is more non trivial than what we have done. And it's not really in the realm of this course. So I'll just put it down here. Edmonds 65 polytime algorithm for computing maximum matching and a barrier as a certificate that that is indeed a maximum matching. Okay, good. So, so now I want to tell you about some. Are there any questions or concerns regarding any of this that we have discussed so far? All right. If not, let's switch gears slightly. It's still going to be matchings, but slightly different problem. All right. So, in the case of cubic graphs, matchings have been studied very extensively, right? And I think I told you in a previous lecture. So let's just write down Peterson's theorem, right? So every cubic, rather than writing without cut edges, let me just write two edge connected. But in the case of cubic, we know that edge connectivity is the same as vertex connectivity. You proved it on one of your assignments. So let me just say every cubic two connected graph is matchable. This is 1891. And then I think I told you a strengthening of this, which is that for every single edge, you can find a perfect matching containing that edge. So there is a strengthening in a cubic two connected graph. Each edge belongs to some perfect matching. Okay? You might be proving this on your assignment or one of the do-it-yourself, try-it-yourself problems. Okay. The proof is fairly similar to the original proof of, the proof of Peterson's theorem that we discussed in our lectures, which is using Tutt's theorem. So using very similar ideas, you can prove this result. Okay. Um, Turns out people had some stronger conjectures. So in particular, Lowas and Plummer, they had a conjecture that in a cubic two connected graph, there are exponentially many perfect matchings. So this is a Lowas Plummer conjecture, which has been proven actually. Um, in a cubic. So this actually was proven by Esperet et al. In 2010. Right? And in particular, what they proved is this following theorem. Every two connected cubic graph G has at least, and this is where it gets weird, the exponent is not an easy one, at least 2 to the power number of vertices divided by this huge number perfect matchings. Right, so it doesn't tell you much about small graphs, but once your number of vertices is really large, it gives you good lower bounds, or at least reasonable lower bounds, right? But the main point is that it does prove the conjecture of Lowas and Plummer, which is that there exists exponentially many perfect matchings in the number of vertices, or in the number of edges, whichever you like to think, because they are related linearly, right, in a cubic graph. Okay, so that was proved in 2010. We are not going to be discussing this much more. I can share the article with you if you're interested in it. Um, but I want to tell you a slightly different type of conjecture now. Some conjectures that are still open, and they are similar to conjectures we have seen at the beginning of this course. So let me go back to cycle and bond spaces, and yeah, I think we talked about cycle double cover conjecture at some point. Actually, maybe it is in connectivity. Yeah, yeah, in connectivity. Okay, good. So I want to remind you of some definitions that we discussed back then, right? So you might recall the cycle double cover conjecture, right? Just to give you an example, here is a graph, one of my favorite graphs that I keep drawing throughout the course. And what you see here is a cycle double cover. Right? Don't worry what I've written on the left. But basically, you have a bunch of cycles, and every edge appears in exactly two of those cycles. Oh, I think there is a reason. So you have to include the last edge, the cycle outside as well. If you include the outer cycle, then you will get a cycle double cover. And if you just look at the four cycles, that we called a cycle at most two cover. Okay. So what was the cover? Um, So we defined a one cover as a family of subgraphs, so that if you take the union of all the edges, then you will get the entire edge set of the graph, and each edge appears in exactly one member in this family. That is a one cover. Okay, because every edge is covered exactly once. All right. Good. And similarly, you can define a two cover. And for a one cover or two cover, we called it a cycle one cover or a cycle two cover if all the subgraphs are cycles. Right? So here notice that each this is just a family of subgraphs. But if every subgraph is a cycle, then we call it a cycle one cover or a cycle two cover. Make sense? All right. So I want to tell you about a conjecture regarding perfect matchings and cubic graphs, which is reminiscent of the cycle double cover conjecture. And it is also open just like the cycle double cover conjecture. Okay. All right. So let's go back to matchings. All right. So think about the Peterson graph. Okay. Let us count the number of perfect matchings here. Okay, let me label the vertices 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So how can we count the number of perfect matchings here? In general, it's not so quick, but I have done this many times, so I will guide you through the process. So look at this cut, these five edges, right? They separate the inside five cycle from the outside five cycle. How many edges can you take from these five edges in any perfect matching? Supposing n is a perfect matching, so let's say this is a cut C, and I take a perfect matching, which is, let's say, green,
Minimum one edge.
minimum one. Okay, and can you make it stronger? So it could be one,
3,
three. Okay,
5.
sounds legit, and five. Right, exactly. Right, these are the three possibilities because you have an odd number of vertices on both sides. Now you can check on your own that such perfect matchings do not exist. Such perfect matchings do not exist in the Peterson graph. Okay? So the only possibility you have is 1 and 5. Well, if you take all five edges, then you basically have a perfect matching, right? So there is only one perfect matching of this kind, which is to take all the five edges and then you are done. Then you can't take any more edges because you have matched all the 10 vertices, right? So one such perfect matching. And now supposing you take one edge from these five edges. So
Sir,
let's think about, yeah, go ahead.
wait, why do that 3 case does not exist?
Yeah, you can see
Okay.
what happens. So there are, I mean, so the graph is very symmetric, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
okay,
if
okay.
you think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that, you
Yeah, yeah,
can
okay.
basically reduce it to two possible cases. And in
Yeah, yeah,
each
yeah.
case, you can draw the remaining graph and see that you can't extend it to a perfect match.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Sorry.
Okay. So you get zero from this. So now let's suppose we are looking at a perfect matching which uses exactly one of these five edges. And because this graph is so symmetric, as you can see from the drawing, it doesn't really matter which of the five edges I choose, right? So let me choose the top edge. If you choose the top edge and you're in your perfect matching, that means that you cannot take any of these edges, right? So these edges, these four edges, cannot be in any perfect matching because we are looking at those perfect matchings that meet the cut in exactly one edge. Okay? And now I claim that there is not too many ways in which you can complete this. So can anybody tell me how would you complete this perfect matching? So one of your edges is 0, 5.
Number of matchings inside minus multiplied by the number of matchings outside.
Sure, sure. So let's look at the outside. How many perfect matchings do you see outside?
1,
One. Can you tell me what is it?
4, 3, and 2, 1.
Exactly. It's just 1, 2, and 3, 4. Right? So you have to take those two edges. And what about the inside?
There's only one.
There's only one, 9, 7, and 6, 8. Right? Because the Peterson graph is so symmetric, they both have equal number of perfect matchings, 1 and 1. So as per what Kapil said, it's just 1 multiplied by 1. Right? So that gives you your perfect matching. And so now how many perfect matchings do you have of this type?
5.
Exactly 5. 5 such perfect matchings. Right? So in total, the Peterson graph has 6 perfect matchings. So if you take all of these 6 perfect matchings, supposing you take all the 6 perfect matchings, M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, and M6. I have a question. How many times will any edge be covered? Each edge will be used how many times? Remember, every edge is a
Twice.
twice. Exactly. Each edge is used twice. Each edge is used twice. Okay, so that's interesting. So what does this form? This forms a, let's call it a perfect matching two cover, right? Instead of a cycle two cover, it is a perfect matching two cover. Every subgraph is a perfect matching. Right? So we have a cubic graph that is two connected. In particular, we are looking at the Peterson graph. And in this particular example, we have exactly six perfect matchings. And these six perfect matchings, they comprise a perfect matching two cover. Right? So Fulkerson conjectured that you can always do this in any cubic graph. You can always find six perfect matchings, right? The graph could have exponentially many perfect matchings, but you can always find six of them that will comprise a two cover. There is one small caveat, I will come to that. Um, so this is conjecture 17.6. Every two connected cubic graph has admits a perfect matching two cover. Notice that because the graph is cubic, right? Cubic is three regular. You can do a simple counting argument and show that this has to be six perfect matchings. Okay. So, in fact, um, such a family, such a family comprises six perfect matchings by counting argument. Okay. Notice that the number of edges is completely determined, right? You have a three regular graph. So you know exactly the number of edges. You know exactly how many edges are there in any perfect matching, right? Because that's just the number of vertices divided by 2. So that just gives you a simple counting argument to show that it has to be exactly six perfect matchings. Okay. So generally, in most versions of Fulkerson conjecture, they generally say that there are six perfect matchings that cover all the edges, each one exactly twice. But the fact that it's six is just a consequence of the definitions. Okay. So this is an open problem. There is one small caveat. Remember, in a cycle, so if you talk about cycle double covers, right? What is a cycle double cover for a cycle graph? Can anybody tell me? Does this graph have a cycle double cover?
Take two cycles.
Take two cycles. So you mean the same cycle twice?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You take this cycle once and you take this cycle another time, you get a cycle double cover. Right? So if you recall, in the cycle double cover conjecture, we allow repeating the same cycle again. Otherwise, you get these small counter examples. Right? So in the same sense, here also, you can repeat the same perfect matching twice. So repeating perfect matchings is allowed. And that was allowed when we discussed one covers and two covers, right? So it is coming from there, right? It's not something new. Okay. Okay. So if you are allowed to repeat perfect matchings, then what can you say about a three-edge colorable graph? What if your graph is three-edge colorable? Supposing I give you a graph that is three-edge colorable. It is a cubic two connected graph, and I can color the edges with three colors like this. Then do you see a perfect matching two cover? Then we should be able to get a perfect matching two cover, right? Remember, you're allowed to repeat perfect matchings.
Yeah, means if we repeat the
Exactly.
perfect matching which is horizontal,
Mhm.
then means if we take it once and then again, then we get a two cover,
Right.
right?
Oh, you are taking a fourth perfect matching here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That does not give you a two cover. There are some edges which will not be covered twice. But
Oh,
there is
okay.
an easier way to do it. You have three perfect matchings. They cover all the edges. So you just repeat them,
Yeah.
right? You're allowed to repeat perfect matchings. So in this case, you can just take M1, M1, M2, M2, and M3, M3, right? And this is a perfect matching two cover. Perfect matching two cover. Okay, so if your graph is three edge colorable, in other words, it's a class one graph, then you're basically done. Okay, so class one graphs admit perfect matching two covers. So we have already observed that Fulkerson's conjecture is clearly true for the class one cubic graphs. Okay. Also, once you have a two connected cubic graph, if it has sufficiently many vertices, I think it's six vertices, it anyways will be a simple graph. That's easy to check. Otherwise, you'll get a two vertex cut. Okay, so these are basically simple graphs, except for four vertices and two vertices, I think. Okay, so in the case of class one, you're basically done. So you just need to prove this for class two graphs, which is basically proving it for snarks, right? So class 2 is an open problem, right? And the reason I showed you the Peterson graph as the example is because it is a class 2 graph. There is no three-edge coloring here. There is no proper three-edge coloring, right? The only way to do it in the Peterson graph is to consider all the six perfect matchings, which are all different from each other in this case, right? And they form a perfect matching two cover as per Fulkerson's conjecture. Um, Good. There is a weaker version of this conjecture. Um, right. So here is Berge. This is conjecture 17.7. Let me see. Yeah. So what Berge thought is that, why do we want to cover all the edges twice? Why don't we cover each edge at least once? Notice that if you have a double cover using six perfect matchings, you can throw away one perfect matching and every edge will be still covered at least once. Right? So if you just want to cover all the edges using perfect matchings, you don't need six perfect matchings. Five will suffice. But then you won't cover each edge twice, you will cover some edges only once. In particular, the perfect matching you threw away, those edges will now be covered only once. Right? So every two connected cubic graph admits um, perfect matching at most, yeah, yeah, admits a cover using 5 perfect matchings. So with 5 perfect matchings, you can cover all the edges at least once, right? So each edge covered at least once. This is actually how we define cover in the beginning. Okay. This is also open, right? It's slightly weaker than Fulkerson's conjecture because if that is true, this is true, but not the other way around. So, anyways, so that's all I want to tell you about these conjectures. They are very similar to cycle double cover conjecture, so I thought I'll tell you about it. And I have a question for everyone now, and you don't have to answer me now. I'm also going to post it on the group. So we have 3 more lectures remaining, right? Um, so there are 2 possibilities. If you want to know more about matchings, we can go deeper into matchings, and I can tell you about things in matching theory that may not be in Bondimurti. But if you would like to know about some another topic in graph theory, that's also possible, and that would be Hamiltonian cycles. So if you would like to know more about Hamiltonicity, we can do that, or we can do matchings. I'll do whatever the majority chooses. Okay. So I'm going to maybe put a post on WhatsApp and ask everyone to respond by um, tomorrow morning, 9 or 10 a.m. And then we will be covering whatever the majority vote is. Okay. But yeah, basically the syllabus is done, and unless we continue matchings, the remaining stuff is not going to be that relevant to your assignment. But if you continue on matchings, then I'm not sure about that. Okay. Um, all right. So that's it. Are there any questions or concerns? I'll stop recording now.